At Cootamundra today, I think the main things that I took out of today was, again, as normal, you always have to have your basic nutrition correct. Phosphorus, nitrogen, soil pH, and sort of just making sure that your sort of crop's actually sown in a timely manner, good weed control, so it's actually sort of got everything, there ready for it. Outside that, I think, it's fine tuning that timing, particularly in terms of sort of nitrogen timing. We've learned so much over the last 15 to 20 years, and I think we can continue to sort of learn, refine. We've got better machinery to actually apply it as we need it. It's not a case where sort of a set and forget, put it all up front and we can sort of shut the gate. I think we can sort of put our nitrogen on as the crop sort of requires it, and we've got the capacity to put it out and the season unfolds and the moisture to develop that sort of crop to its potential and get the right sort of cost benefit sort of return on that sort of dollar expended. There was a lot of time sort of spent on particularly trace elements today, and there's a lot of unknowns. As someone actually said, it's been looked at for 20 years or more and the responses have actually been inconsistent. We are seeing things such as sort of lower zinc levels in our soils, and there has been a net export of nutrients out the front gate. Once upon a time, we used to use single super and it had sort of quite a few trace elements in it, whereas now it's all purified product. And when we're taking good crop yields out and not putting it back, we are going to be running down on some of those trace elements. So the real message that came out of trace elements was to look at your soil tests, do some tissue tests, start running some trial strips to see if you're actually noticing responses, and particularly harvesting those out, because if you're not actually harvesting out sort of economic returns on that sort of dollar expended with your trace element, profitability wise, you've really got to be probably questioning that. Though I think things like herbicides, sulfonylureas, root diseases, say rhizotonia, there is certainly, and later sowings on particularly say acid soils, things like, particularly zinc, we do visually seem to be getting some better cropping responses in terms of growth from the likes of zinc. So that's something to have a look at, to watch, and just fine tune it in terms of sort of trial strips, monitoring soil tests, tissue tests, and seeing if there is actually a dollar response. Copper's another one. They're probably the two big things, zinc and copper, that we sort of talked about today. Copper, when you've got deficiencies, particularly with wheat, copper, you actually get pollen and sterility and therefore poor grain set, not to be confused with frosting, or even sort of just a hot, dry finish. So the whole copper story, where you've actually got low copper levels, it is quite pronounced, and I think it's a case of identifying what is the issue. Is it the copper? My rule of thumb is actually sort of under a soil copper of 0.3 part per million. You need to start looking at that pretty seriously, because if you've got the sort of the wrong conditions in terms of sort of low copper levels, and particularly with high nitrogen levels, it seems to be worse where you've got high nitrogen. If you've got high nitrogen, you've actually got it can just blow up. So that was really probably the takeaway message. Just look at what deficiencies you may have, start running some trial strips, and just monitor and look for sort of what the responses are.